Good afternoon, folks. So, last time I showed you guys what we needed to know about field properties, and you had that assignment, and you have the take-home midterm assigned that's due by November 9th. And while you are finding time to do that, we're going to go ahead and move on and start looking at SQL, Structured Query Language. Alright, so I've got the PowerPoint on Canvas, and just bringing up the chat here. Okay. So if you want to follow along with the PowerPoint or reference it later, these PowerPoints I made myself, so I prefer to deliver the information concise and use this more as a way to remind myself what to go over. Okay, so today we're going to talk about SQL, and if you haven't heard of it before, like I said earlier, it stands for Structured Query Language. It is a language that allows you to access information in a database, pull out data, build reports, perform analysis on it, pull data for analysis, and by manipulate, I'm talking about anything from creating new tables, adding records, editing field values, and this is the next step in database design, is actually implementing your database. And so once you get through the whole process and you've decided your field properties, you're ready to delve into the language and take that plan and actually create some tables and create a database. All right, so here, this first part we're going to do is really just to ease you into it. So we'll take a broad overview of what you can do with this. And if you want to follow along and mess around with it, there is a website. A lot of you have probably used this in my other classes, and I didn't realize, and a student brought it up that they had added SQL Lite to Replit. All right, and what SQL Lite or SQLite is, it's a very lightweight database that is meant to be attached to like an offline application. So it's a way to store and organize a lot of information. If you have, for example, I had a student use it for a project where he needed to figure out which substitute teachers to contact for specific situations, and so he came to me with this problem, and it was they have substitute teachers all over the area. We're in a huge educational district, and so there's a lot of different schools that are spread out, and so some people might live in one corner. They aren't going to want to substitute teach in the opposite corner of the district. So he needs a way to find out who is close to the place where they need a substitute teacher. You know, substitute teaching is a part-time job, and you take what you can get, but sometimes you're busy. And so it needs to keep track of what hours they're not available and what days they're not available, and maybe their knowledge areas, depending on the class or the grade, whatever grade you're in, because it's nothing worse than having basically a babysitter in your class that you can't get help from. All right. So anyway, with this, he was able to create a database of all the information. And then if all he had to do was put in the information about a job, and it would just show him who to contact. And so before that, they had the information on an Excel spreadsheet, and they just sorted by the category that they needed, like who was available on Monday, and then they had to sort by location and then sort by time. And it was just a lot of extra work to figure out something that a database could tell you in seconds. All right, but a little bit of setup. So you can use this for a lot of real world problems, solving real world problems. All right, we already talked about there's videos and information towards the beginning of the class that talks about who uses a database mostly. And if you are in the programming degree and you plan on becoming a developer and you work on web apps, you'll need a database to store persistent data. And so more than likely you'll work with this. And also it's really great in an interview if you have SQL experience. And since we're doing this on Replit, everything you create will be saved to your account and you can use it as a portfolio. All right, so let's just take a look here at some of the terminology. For the people that have taken programming languages, or maybe taking a class where you're using a programming language, most of them are case sensitive, and SQL is not case sensitive. All right, names in SQL are, so names of values can be case sensitive, or they are case sensitive. So if I put James in a field with a lowercase j and James in a field with an uppercase j, those would be seen as different values if I was comparing values or something. But if I want to run a command, it doesn't matter if you use lowercase or uppercase. We'll talk about the standards though. So let's break it down. SQL is divided into two parts, Ddl and Dml. All right. The Ddl commands are for defining the actual tables, relationships, primary keys, the structure of the database. All right. And that is the part that you usually create. You only get the chance to create once. And so that's why we spent so much time working on the planning part of the designing the database, the first half, everything with entity relationship diagrams all the way to field properties, is planning for coding your DDL. And so once you create it, if it gets implemented and a company starts using it, at that point it will cost a lot of time and money to change things. So unless it's unusable, you're stuck with what you created. And so you don't want to create a bunch of problems for yourself and other people. Potentially you would maintain the database. More and more people in technology jobs are expected to do more, especially in smaller companies. And after this, you'll at least have experience using it, and you'll have something to show for it. All right. So we'll be creating tables in DDL, and we'll create fields in there. We'll set the field properties, all of that stuff. Okay. The other half here, or the other part of the two parts, is DML, data manipulation language. So this is, once the database is set up, this is going to be, primarily the commands you're going to use. These let you ask questions to the database. So like in the example I talked about, what substitute teachers are near Effingham? What substitute teachers are within range of Mattoon? What substitute teachers can teach on Mondays, things like that. So we'll look at the commands for that. They can get pretty complicated too, because if you want very specific information, the database can grab that for you. Okay, and this also allows you to remove records, add them. So remember what a record is. That's the row. A row in a table is a record. Okay, remember a table represents instances of an entity. So if we have the substitute teacher's entity in our ER diagram, that's going to become the substitute teacher's table in SQL. And if we want to insert more teachers in there or remove them, we'll use DML commands for that. All right, and there's just a host of other little commands that we'll take a look at. Once you understand the grammar of SQL, you can see how limited it is in terms of what you're going to need to do compared to like the English language or even a programming language. It's a little bit simpler than that. It just a lot of people teach themselves, and so a lot of problems tend to pop up in databases implemented by someone who has never learned about database design. Okay, so since we are using Replit, I used to use this site here. You could type in SQL and it would run it for you. But it's a free site, and I'm not even sure if it's still up, so use that at your own peril. I'm going to change this to Replit, choose SQLite. Okay, and so here's a command, an example of a command of DDL for creating a table and adding the fields. So I'll break this down, and we'll take a deeper look at this later as we get into creating our tables in SQL. Okay, so here's the command, create table. Okay. And generally the commands, the keywords in SQL are typed in all caps, so you can easily identify them, but like I said before, it's not case sensitive. All right. Though, depending on which, well, we'll see. I usually use MySQL in this course, and we'll probably take a look at that too, because there's some free software you can use to mess around with that. All right, so this got all messed up. This example is in MySQL, so we'll see if it works in SQLite. Okay, what did you call it, Scott? SQLite or SQLite? Or did anyone ever mention it? Okay. You don't really use this SQLite in like web apps and stuff, so. But it's really good for, it's very low overhead and setup for testing queries. So that's why we're using it, because we want to learn SQL. We're not using it to build an app yet. You will do that in web scripting too, and in the capstone course. But you'll already know how to use SQL. So let's see if this will work. So if you haven't used Replit before, the website is repl.it. You can create a free account. You don't have to pay for it. It'll try to get you to pay for it. You don't have to for anything in this class. And then what you're seeing is on the left, you've got your files. The center is a text editor where you'll type your commands. And on the right is output. So let's copy this in. Let's see if it gives me errors. Doesn't give me an error. So in this case, if we run this command, what it does is it creates a table with 1, 2, 3, 4 fields, car number, and the data type here. So we're going to start learning the actual names of the data types in SQL. So this is the data type for something like a string, varchar, variable character length field, and you can specify a length here. Remember, that was one of the CSS properties. So if I put 15, then only strings of characters, 15 characters will be able to be stored in this field. Okay. And again, if you set it for 15 and then this goes into use for for a while, and you want to change it to something lower or something higher, it could take significant time to change that and work. So again, you want to make sure you plan this stuff out properly. Car name, 15 characters, year, 15 characters, and color, 15 characters. So I didn't really put much thought here. I think I just wanted to see something that would work. Down here, this is how you specify a primary key constraint. All right. What this does is it tells the database if someone tries to insert a duplicate value for car number, stop that from happening. If someone tries to insert info without providing a car number, don't insert it. Okay, so this is a constraint. You don't need this in your table to have a primary key, but you need this to prevent, it's data validation basically. It won't let you ruin the integrity of, won't let any data ruin the integrity of the database by compromising the primary keys, two properties that always have to be true. It has to be unique. Primary keys have to be unique, and they cannot be null. So that does both of those things. You can set those individually manually, but here you can just do both in one go here. And then it also helps you identify in the code which one's the primary key. Okay, and so here we'll get into the syntax more later, but you can see each one is separated by commas, and we've got some parentheses in different places to specify different things, and then we end with a semicolon that lets the database management system, which we haven't talked about that forever. In this case, we're using SQLite, and so that allows the database management system to know when you're done telling it what to do, and it can move on to the next command. So you got to remember your semicolons. And so there's nothing inside of this database but an empty table. So let's insert a record. So I want to insert into cars values. Okay, and if you do it this way, you have to provide a value for each field in order. So it helps if you create your fields in a logical order. So if car name, car number, car name, year, and color. So let's see, what's the car number going to be? And since this is a varchar, it needs a string, so we have to put it in double quotes here. So car number will be 91234R. I don't know what a car number is here. We're just using it as a primary key. Could be VIN number, I don't know. It can be whatever you want. We're the ones designing the database. Okay. Car name, banana, mobile. Alright, and the year. Because we set it up as varchar, we might have to put a string. Let's change that to int so we can use a number value. So when you're using a number value, you don't have to put it in double quotes. So we'll do year 100, and color will go yellow. All right, so let's see if there's any errors. Didn't see any. So the database is creating a table, inserting one record. And now how do we get some output here? So this is probably the single most important command in SQL. It's the one you're going to use the most often, especially in web development, because you're going to be pulling a lot of data out of the database. Okay, so it's select, and here you choose which fields you want to see in your result. So for now, let's just take the car name, and it's from the cars table. So we do cars.carname, so it's telling you get the car name from the cars table. So that's our one field we want to see here. Okay, and then you do a from, and then you put the name of the table you're looking at. Later on, we'll look at how we join tables in here to get information from relationships. And this is the bare minimum here that we need. You can add all kinds of modifiers on here. We'll look at those later. Just a second. All right, I don't know if you'd believe me if I told you what just happened. All right, so this is the joy of live streaming from home, right? All right. So my girlfriend and I got a floating solar-powered pond fountain, and I guess I left it in the sun under the skylight. So I was trying to put it together, and it decided to go off. Outside the water, it's very loud, so put it out of the sun. It burn out the batteries, energy, so it's done now. Okay, back to class. Okay, let's see the output. I'm glad I finished this. All right, what do we do here? Okay. Oh, remember, after each command is completed, you got to put your semicolon. Okay. So it thought that all of this was one command. It didn't recognize the grammar. It said, okay, it's an error. You did it wrong. You got to fix it. And so I knew near line 8. And so it sees here, even though I have this command cut into 2 lines to make it easier to read, that's why I'm doing this. You could do this on 1 line. Everything before the semicolon can all be on 1 line, but it makes it hard to read, so we split it into multiple lines. And so it says error near line 8, so I knew it was somewhere in this command. Okay, and let's see if it works now. Okay, so what are we seeing? It says banana mobile, because we told it to tell us the car name of all the cars in the cars table. All right, so let me add some more here. And you can see, I'm just going to try to add the three of the same thing in. All right, what problem should that cause for us? It should get mad when I try to insert the same primary key for each record. Yeah, so it says unique constraint failed, line 10 and 12. Now, if we allowed that data to go in, okay, I'm missing something. Oh, we don't need this comma. Okay. If I allow that to go in without using a constraint, we now have 3 records with the same primary key. And it's not just a rule for the sake of being a rule. What problems could this cause? Okay, so let's go apple, grape. Alright, so let's say I have 3 different cars in there, but they all have the same primary key. If I have any relationships to this table that uses the primary key as a foreign key, and I put in this ID, it's not going to know which one. It's not going to give me one result. It'll give me 3 results, but I only want one. Well, you know, someone entered this information in wrong, and the software didn't stop them because there's no constraint. And if you don't use this constraint, if you're the developer in that case, you would have to check. You would probably do this anyway, but you would have to make sure you included a check outside of the SQL. But that adds extra steps for the computer to do and is annoying to the developer. So if that's you, you'll just be annoying yourself. If it's someone else, you'll probably get an earful. Okay, so I'm going to put that back in because we do want that to prevent this problem. So all I have to do is change these numbers a bit. Okay. Apple mobile, grape mobile. Alright. You can see that now. Okay. So it's just giving me all the car names of every car in there. We'll say the Apple mobile was the 200-year model. Grape mobile was 300. Okay. But I'm not getting any of the other information. Let's say we want the name. Let's change these colors too. There are yellow grapes, but let's do purple. All right. The grape mobile runs on wine, right? Okay. So there's those. How do you think you would, if I want the year and the color in my result, what do you think I would do for that? So remember, after the select command for pulling out information, you list the fields that you want to look at. So I can do a comma here. They're comma separated. That's how it knows you're putting another field there. You can do cars dot. And then we got a. If you're the one that designed the database, you'll know the field names off the top of your head. Or if you work with the database daily, you will start to memorize these. I haven't looked at this since last semester, this specific SQL command, so I don't remember what I put. Okay, year and color. Oh, that's easy. From the cars table. We only have one table anyway. But you have to include every table. You can pull fields from multiple tables. You just have to include them in here. And we can take a look at that. We'll take a look at that later. Okay, so here we go. We got the banana mobile, 100, yellow, apple mobile. So it's just the data we put in, right? Besides field names, you can also put in some extra information in here. Let's do let's see if this works in SQLite. Name. And copy that. And I can make this so we can see it all in the correct way. Okay. Name. We want year. And we want color. Let's see if this works. Whoops, put that in the wrong place. We want that over here, before the color. Okay. And I'll fix the output here. Okay. So we can put in information to pull. This is the one and only database class. Yes, you're right, Grace. I know it feels like an entirely different class, doesn't it, when we get into this? I'm also just showing a broad overview right now of what we're going to learn about SQL. So none of this is, we'll go into more detail on all of this. I just want to show you what this is used for. So we've looked at creating a table, creating the fields in that table, inserting information, so records, the actual values in the fields, one record at a time. And remember, the records represent instances of the entity for that table. So if we have a cars table, we can assume, but you might have to double check, that each record is a different car. Let's see, field properties. Let me take a look at this last one, make sure I didn't skip any information here. Okay. So yeah, I'm pretty sure we went through this in the last video. So if you didn't see that, you can check the last video. Now, I made a mistake and I labeled the video from the 12th as being from the 5th, October 5th, and I fixed that now. So if you want to look at the information about field properties for the field property homework, look for the database video. Let's see if I can see the name here. Database 1012 will tell you about field properties. This live stream, we're just introducing the SQL programming, which is how you actually create and use a database. We just looked at, so far in the class, we've just looked at how to design it, but once you're done designing it, you actually have to put it together. And you know, you guys have seen a bunch being designed, and you are have designed some yourself, okay? And if they weren't perfect, that's okay. Fitting all of database design into half a semester barely scratches the surface. But we focused on all the important parts that you need to generate a good plan that once it's done, you just have to implement it. It's already done. You don't have to make very many decisions because you made all the decisions during planning. Okay. So, good question, by the way. All right. So, anyway, you can format the output here. I wonder if you can use escape characters or change this. By default, it's putting in a vertical line in between each item that you're pulling out. That kind of makes it a little annoying. I'll look into that. Getting that fixed. Okay. But as long as you can see how to create a database, how to insert values, and how to pull out those values, this is all the most basic forms of the commands, right? Let's see if I can remember how to put comments in SQL here. Yes, maybe it's 2 slashes. Okay. Creating, nope. SQLite, comment syntax. Two consecutive dashes. Begin with 2 and extend up to and including the next new line character. Okay. So we just have to do this. Dash dash. There we go. And let's see. Creating a table and its fields with field properties. I'll label these and then I'll post the link to this so you guys have a basic thing to look back on as we move forward. Because again, these are the most basic commands that you're going to be using, and we'll expand on those as we continue our look at SQL. Okay, so this is inserting records into a table. And here's one thing that I'll also mention again later as we do this. It's really important that in the order of the steps that you put here, it's important. And even though in the real world, well, I guess for testing you might do this, you're probably not going to be creating the database, inserting records, and pulling out the information you want all in one file. A lot of times the database will already be created, but if you created it, you won't need to create it every time if it's in use. But if you're testing something, or you want to test something, you can, you might do something like this as like a demo just to test some ideas. Especially if you're making a small web app. Okay. Or anything small that it really doesn't matter if you need to restructure it. So some really small use case. All right, so inserting records into a table, that's this part, and then down here, pulling information out of the database. And I like to describe this as asking the database a question. Okay, so the question here is, hey database, in your cars table, tell me the name or the car name, the car or the year, and the color of every car. That's what you're asking by writing this. So you're going to be learning the language to ask the database these types of questions. All right, and so there's one result. We can do, I'll show you a little bit of a shorthand. If you just want to see all the data in the database, or I'm sorry, in the table, you just have to do select, and then you use this wildcard here, asterisk. That will let you use every field. It just says use every field from every table I've listed. All right. And we want to grab this from cars. All right, so we should see 2 results here. This one is, the first one is this query. These are called queries. I'm querying the database. That's just a fancy way of saying asking it a question. All right. If you encounter words you don't know, look them up. You have to be able to teach yourself this stuff. I mean, in the class, I'm going to go over it, but you're going to encounter all kinds of stuff that you aren't going to understand. I do every day still, and I have to look it up and try to understand it. Okay. A question, especially one addressed to an official or organization, probably not that. Okay, so ask a question about something in order to express one's doubt about it or to check its validity or accuracy. Okay, that's probably closer to what we're doing. But anyway, it's not exact. It's just a fancier way to say question here. So, but we call them queries. And if you took the what is it called? Practical software applications, the Microsoft Office class, and you did the access section, all right, you would have had to deal with some queries here and there, all right, but the way that information is delivered doesn't really give you much background or context, unfortunately. So that's what this class is for. Is the string before the mobile names an ID? Oh, mobile names. Okay. Yes, this is the ID. Yep. And we know that because it's the first value that we're inserting, and you insert values in the order that you've listed them in the create table. So those fields are always going to be in that order. Depending on the database management system, I'm assuming most modern ones are going to make this storage independent. They all store files differently, or not all of them, but there are different ways you can store a database in terms of the physical files and the way those are stored on a hard drive. And so the car number's first, and we know that's the primary key, at least in this example, because what else does it mean? But down here we specified a primary key constraint on it, and so that makes it a good field to use as a primary key. And so you'll notice these are all different. So good question about that. So it is an ID, and we're using it as the primary key. Okay, so here, look how simple this query is, and it just grabs all the information. Here we have a more complicated one where we're putting some string literals in so that we can understand what these are. All right. So this one is all the fields from the listed tables. And I'll put asterisk is the wildcard for all tables, or I'm sorry, all fields. So that is this asterisk here is the part that's telling it to grab all the fields. Okay, and then here is an example of filtering with a query. And you know, depending on what you're doing, you're probably going to want to get specific information out of here. So before I mentioned, you know, in an example for Amazon, maybe they want to know how many people named Jim bought multiple raincoats on April 30th, 2017. Okay, so you could write that query and it would pull out that information. And why you would want to know that, that's up for the people that order the report to decide. All you have to do is get them the information they need. Though, depending on what industry you're in, it helps to have some sort of knowledge, so that way you can make some assumptions. Or a lot of times when non-technical people ask for stuff, they don't know what you can do, and so you'll want to talk to them and say, you know, here's what you're asking for. What do you actually need? And anyway, they probably will just say, I need this. And then you can say, well, I could also get you this and this. And then they'll say, you get a raise. Okay. If it's a good company. Okay. So and this is just an easy way to get a query going, is select star. And we have to use the name of the tables. And I think I said this earlier, but it's just a standard to put your keywords and SQL commands in all caps, so they're easy to identify. And you can see the replit here does have color coding, so it can help you identify different things. I think year might be a reserved word for pulling the current year as a function. Maybe we'll have to look that up. But since we have the context of pulling it out of this table, I think it's okay. That's why it's still working. All right. So select star from cars. When you want to filter, you just put where, and then you give it a condition. All right. So maybe I only want cars that were models from the years after 100. I don't want an old model car in this search. So we can do where year equal, or no, is, oh, and we stored that as a string, didn't we? So if we store it as a string, no, we changed it to a value, good. If we stored it as a string, we couldn't within the SQL compare the values using greater than and less than, because as a string, well, it would compare the values of the characters, not the value of the number. So we change it to a numeric data type, which allows us to perform functions and mathematical operations on it. So where year is greater than 100. So our third result here should show us, what did I forget? Select star from cars where, oh, cars.year, because it might need that. Nope, it's still mad. Line 23. Oh, there it is. Forgot my semicolon there. Okay, and so here we go. I'm going to comment. I should have just used the comment shortcut. I'm just going to comment these out for now because it's getting crowded in here. So we wanted only cars with a year greater than 100, so there's those two. All right, and then maybe we only want cars that are made after the year 100, but also that are the color red. We can do and cars.color equals red, and it's a string, so make sure you mark it as such in here. When you do a comparison like this, you need to put the same data type that is being used for the field. So year is an int. So if I'm going to compare it to a literal value, it needs to be an int. Color is a string. So if I want to compare it to a color, I need to use a string literal here. So you need to use a string because the data type for here is a alphanumeric data type. Okay, and this is an alphanumeric data type. It's just the literal value of 1. Okay, and so what's our result? Well, there's only one car that fits this description, so it filters it down to that. If we had more cars that were red, let's add another car into here. There is a shorthand for adding records more easily than this, but I don't want to confuse anyone yet. So this is confusing when it's all crowded like this, so let me break this up into each individual command, and we can make some space here. Okay. And it's indenting here, so I'll fix that. Okay, and here it's okay if we indent. This is kind of a, well, I don't know. This is the way I do it, and it's kind of a, that's a very good question. So, and I think I know why you're asking that, Grace. So Grace is asking, does SQLite have a Writeline command? Because if you do want to pull out, information like this, and you want to see a bunch, and you want to put a blank line in there, how would be an easy way to do that? Let's see. let's see if, I'm going to turn these back on so we get all the queries running at once. Though usually, you're not going to, well, maybe you would. Usually, the result you want is going to be just one thing. And if you need multiple things to get to that, you won't be printing them out. You just, and the printing out represents sending it to the software. Here we're just printing it out to test it. But some software would have the ability to communicate to the database. You would have these queries pre-programmed, or you would provide a way, or actually a lot of times in like web app software, there is just commands to write your queries in the software, and then it will access the database that way. But some are separated. You'll see it in a lot of different ways depending on where you end up. Okay, 19. Oh, I forgot to change the ID on this new car. Let's take a number out. We'll say it's the year 400, and it is the green Apple Mobile, and it's going to be green. Okay, that should fix our errors. No errors. Okay, so how could we put a space in there? Let's see. I'm going to try, see if I can do it myself, just from my knowledge. And if I can't, I definitely know how to look it up. So let's see. We can do select, and we'll just put let's see if the escape character works here. And let's see, from 1, let's see what that does. Nope. Okay, let's just try without the from. Oh, okay. I forgot my semicolon. All right. At least every time I forget a semicolon, that'll really hopefully help you not forget to do that. Okay, yeah, let's get rid of the from. Okay, it's not doing the escape character, so we can look up here. SQLite character for new line. Okay, and if you use Stack Overflow, because now that we're going to start looking at languages, you're probably going to be looking up commands. The internet is your textbook, which unfortunately is not always the best organized. So you'll learn which sites are useful. Stack Overflow is useful if you know how to use it. And so when I went here, someone's asking about inserting a new line, okay, and I started reading the problem. All you want to understand from the problem is to make sure that it's similar to what you need. Okay, the solution will not be in here. What you're looking for is answers, and then if it has a green check mark, that means the person that asked the question used their solution and they thought it worked. So we gave them the check mark. And if that doesn't help you, you can also look at alternatives, because sometimes they'll say things like, you could also do this, and it might fit your situation better. And you're going to use this in any type of programming situation. The more specific it is, the harder it will be to find the answer. And so sometimes in that case, what you do is you go back to the basics, and you're going to have to break down and understand how it works, so that way you know what to do. That is generally, it will make you a better programmer, but you don't always have the time to do that, so using resources like this is perfectly fine. And once you see enough of the pieces put together, the big picture will reveal itself. And then you'll have enough context to understand what's going on. In the beginning, it's difficult because you just have to take things on faith. Put in the command, gives you an answer, it looks right, move on. because we're just learning the basics. Anyway. This is for inserting new line characters. Okay. Let's see. So here they're actually writing code to manipulate the database outside of SQL on this one. You can think of this as language is this. Okay. I don't know. It's not what we need. Okay. Oh, okay. The new line character is character 10, so we can select character 10 to insert a new line. This is exactly what we need. A lot of times the stuff on Stack Overflow is very specific, so it's not too hard to find basic information like this online, but more complicated information you can find on Stack Overflow. But the in-between stuff that explains from the basics to the complicated stuff, that is that's a desert on the internet. So that's why I try to do that in my I try to provide that in my class here. So I'm trying to get you from nothing to usable information and everything in between. Okay, so whoops, we don't want this whole thing to be a string because I just printed that out. We only want this. Select character 10. There we go. So good question. In Grace, you had that's a very good point. I will be asking you to write multiple queries in the assignments, so definitely this is a good way to organize that. So make it easier for you to read while testing and easier for me to read while grading. So I'm glad you thought of that. This is insert a new line in the output. So what this is right here, this is a function that takes in a number, and that number relates to a character based on whatever system that the database management system uses. So it's probably ASCII. Let's see. So, you know, just in case you want to insert other things in here. Here we go. It is, yeah, it is. So, zoom in. Okay. So, new line is 10, just like we did. We've got vertical tabs, horizontal tabs. This will also make your stuff easier to read. Let's see if we can get rid of those vertical bars. SQLite, remove bars between fields. Maybe I need to be more specific. So, okay, so this character is above the enter key that I'm talking about here. If you've been in other programming classes, sometimes it's used to represent or. Let's see. We can see that. here. So here's the enter key. Above that is the backslash, and if you hold shift and hit this, gives you a vertical bar. Whoops. In Linux, it's commonly referred to as a pipe, and it's used to do something, combine functions or something. I'm not familiar. I did it in grad school. I haven't done it since, so it's not important for this class. Anyway, what it means here is just use nothing. It just means they're just putting it here to show the different, these are different fields that I'm pulling from the table. So it's basically where these commas are, they're going to put a vertical bar. So can we get rid of that? Remove vertical bars from output. Got to be specific here. There we go. Okay, we can turn header output on. That would be better. Okay, let's try that. Column mode, turn header output on. That will get you something similar. Okay, so dot mode column, dot headers on. Let's try that. And this is going into this is manipulating the database management system here, changing settings. So I'm not sure if it'll let us do it from this file because it's an SQL file. It's looking for SQL code. And I'm not sure if we can get to the command line from here. Dot headers on. Okay. If not, I'll look into it. Headers on. Alright, it's going to give me an error, isn't it? Mode should be of ASCII column. Oh, we probably have to put in, maybe put it in a string here. Okay. There we go. Dot headers. So it's called headers, not header. Oh, I have headers. And maybe this one we don't need to put double quotes. Not a Boolean value on, assuming no. So let's try yes. Assuming no. Okay, it told me to use on and off, but oh, maybe we need to do okay. Dot headers on. Got that. I may have to look at this on my own time, so I'm not wasting your time. But now I'm really curious. And it did do the column, so we no longer have our vertical bars. And what it's doing instead is it's putting tabs in between our data, and it's cutting off some of the data here. I believe that's probably just the... Oh, that's because I set the name field to 15 characters. So everything after that is just ignoring. Let's count that. So 5, 5, and 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So I don't know why it's cutting that off. Okay. And another way we could make this better is, I believe you can concatenate this. Let's see if that works. Nope, I think you have to use a function. But let's fix this header thing first. Okay. So let's look up SQLite headers on. Let's see headers. For some reasons, dot commands are restrictive. The dot command must be entirely contained on a single line. Okay. Dot commands do not recognize comments. Okay, that makes sense. Okay. Okay, so dot mode list, dot separator. Okay. Next, no. Let's do header. Okay, we got dot headers on. I might have put some sort of space in here. No? Maybe if we get rid of these, maybe we don't need those. There it goes. Okay. So since they're not SQL commands, we don't need semicolons after it. Alright. And so now, if we take a look at it, down here this looks fine. Here are my car numbers. Here are my car names, the years, and the colors. Okay, and then here's another, this is a separate query, and we didn't separate that, so if we want to do a new line, we can do that down here. Okay, so we can separate that out. And now, oh no, now it's showing the headers. Okay, so we want to turn those headers off before we print out these new lines. So we'll have to do that if you want headers on, which I recommend headers on. That way you can see the field names. So we need to turn it off here, and then get the output, and then we'll turn it back on immediately. So I don't expect you to type this or memorize it or anything. Just use this example. I'll post this in an announcement. I'll do it right now because I'll forget if I don't. Alright, so SQL over view, SQL overview demo with comments. All right. So you guys can access this later, or right now if you want. You can even open it now. Remember, if you make any changes, it'll copy it into your account. And if you want to, if I change, I'm going to continue to change it. If you want to see, we're almost out of time, so I don't have that much else to show today. But you can always go back to that link, and it'll show you the latest version of what I've done. So basically, if you want to do a new line, you need to do this between your queries. Okay. And again, we're just doing this for the class. This is probably not something that you're going to do in the real world, but it really does help you understand the way the output works in SQL. Okay, so since we turned it off, we're not getting the headers for this result. Turning it back on so we can get the headers on the tables. Okay. What was the other thing? Concatenating. Okay, so up here, I guess we just don't even need this anymore. So we can just take that out. Grace's question solved that, or led to the solution to that. So thank you. All right. So here we're selecting 3 fields. In both of these, we're selecting all the fields. All right. And so here are the basic, the most basic parts of SQL: creating a table, inserting values, and then querying the table. All right, so we'll look at more commands. We'll look at how to create a database from a database design, and have multiple tables, and this starts to make more sense. This makes foreign keys and relationships make a lot more sense. So we'll take a look at that too. All right, if you have more questions, go ahead and email those to me. And if it's a lot of questions, we'll set up a Zoom meeting. If it's a simple question, we can answer it in the email. And I'll see you guys next Monday. All right, have a good day.